Alright, go ahead and open up QGIS. This video is just going to show you some of the more basic navigation functions and a very key plugin that I'd like you all to download. QGIS might have other windows when you pull it up, but these are the only two that I'd like you to start out with. This is the browser panel and the layer panel. The browser panel acts kind of like a library or a directory. It's the way QGIS looks at your computer. So when everything's condensed on my Windows, I have my home setting, here's my C drive and my D drive, and if you have an external hard drive or a thumb drive, it'll show up as another letter with a colon after it. I'm going to just work off my desktop to keep it simple. So here's my desktop, and you can see my tutorial 1 folders right here. So if you unzipped everything, you should see a bunch of .shps, which we know are shapefiles. And you could go ahead and drag in, for instance, the county file, maybe the conserved lands file, and they're starting to appear down here when you drag them in. They appear in the layer panel. The way I like to describe it is the layer panel is kind of like your iTunes playlist. You can change the order of these, which one comes first and which one is drawn second. And if you remove them from here, like I might remove the county's shapefile for a second. It says, you sure you want to remove this? I say, okay. And it's gone. But I didn't delete it, right? It's still on my computer, and the actual file, of course, is stored under my desktop, under tutorial 1, as county. So whatever you do in the program, when you change color or the symbology or that kind of thing, you're really just changing the playlist. You might, think of it that way. Even if you change the name in here, right? You see how it's showing me the pathway right there? C:users/binmeter/desktop, tutorial 1, conserve lands, etc. I can change this name here if I double click. Double-clicking gives me the properties, right? Every layer has properties, and you can either control-click on a Mac or right-click on a PC, and you get a little drop-down menu here. And the attribute table and the properties are probably the two most important options. You can also double-click, and it will bring you automatically to the properties. So as I was saying, I'm going to try to change the name here. General layer name, conserve lands. Maybe I want this to look pretty, so I say conserved space lands. And I told you never to use a space in class, but all I meant by that is don't ever use a space when you're naming files as they're going to appear on the actual hard drive. This is called a UNC right here, and on Macs it's a little different, but what it is the pathway that QGIS uses to find your file. And if there are spaces in this UNC, then sometimes it can't find the file and it gets messed up. So don't ever use spaces on the actual pathway name, but this is kind of just an alias, a pretend label, and it doesn't matter because it's right in the program. So I say conserve lands, I say OK, and it changes the name, but if I hover over it, you can see that the pathway is still the same. I could call this Billy Bob Joe, and it wouldn't change the original file name. So you can name these layers as you want and change the symbology and such. So I've shown you the property panel, the property, I'll say, window. And the properties window is good. It has, of course, general information, tells us what the coordinate reference system is. We'll get into that in future classes. Don't worry about it at the moment. Style is how you symbolize what you're seeing. We played around with this a little bit, on last Wednesday. You can change, of course, the color. If you want to change the actual way that this single symbol is happening, you can go to Simple Fill and choose to have, transparent fill, or, change the border color. You can change the border width. You're going to have to play around with that a bit. I'm not going to go through all of those details. The other important window is the attribute table window. So when I open that, you're going to see, oh, interesting. This is all information. This is all data about my shapefile. Now, if you remember, but rasters don't have attribute tables, at least not in the way we're going to use them. they have one value for every pixel. But in a shapefile, there are different values. We can have any number of what we'd say, attributes, columns. These fields all are different types of data about each individual shape. So when I select them, you might see, oh, that one just got yellow. I wonder why. I could scroll down and find, any one of these. These are all different types of conserved lands, and there's all this information about it. And we'll get into the attribute table a little later, but all these buttons up here are going to be important. These are selection tools and calculator tools, and it's kind of like a mini version of Excel, though it's all kind of within the shapefile. Cool. So we've got our browser, we've got our layers, and the other thing I want you to do is, in order to just get a base map, let's say you want to just see where this is on the planet, there's a plugin that's really important. Now, plugins are a little different. They're kind of like tools, third-party tools. They're tools that users make, and we can download and use. A lot of these kind of tools that are already in the program started off as plugins, but then they got so good that the developers at QGIS said, let's just incorporate those plugins into the programs, into the main program. So all of these tools, which we're going to learn how to use slowly, you can access those directly in the vector and raster toolbar, but there are also all these buttons here that we'll learn how to use as well. So the plugin I'm going to go to Manage and Install Plugins. It's called the OpenLayers plugin, and what it does, I'm going to type it in here, OpenLayers. Oops, I think it might be OpenLayers. There it is. And this is really great. Hit install. Hit close. And that OpenLayers plugin gives us access to some pretty awesome base maps. We've got Stamen design. We could say, ooh, I want a Stamen terrain map. And these guys make some pretty cool stuff. And it's going to pop it on top here. And it gives us a nice kind of general topography and relief. If you want to see your information on top, you got to bring the base map, of course, to the bottom, right? There we go. So there's the Stamen. Most of the time what I use is, it's under Web OpenLayers plugin. I use the Google Maps satellite layer because it's just nice to see satellite imagery. Most people understand what satellite imagery is. So I'm going to uncheck the Stamen one. I might even just remove that. I'm going to drag the Google image to the bottom. And only some of it loaded, so I'm going to grab my zoom tool right here. I'm going to zoom in and see what happens. And it will, hopefully it will reload. It's taking longer than usual. Yep, there you go. So now if I get rid of these other layers, I can see, oh wow, look at all this kind of beautifully mosaicked imagery. And you can kind of see the St. Lawrence Valley there, and it's a nice thing to have. So you've got your tools. These are the toolbars that we're going to be using a lot. We've got different ways to add data over here. We've got our layers panel where we drag things up and down, and we right click and look at the properties or the open attribute table. Right, this is the data, and this is kind of how we change the look of the file and do joins and things. And then we've got this key plugin, which is kind of just our base map. And you can use whichever one you think looks good. OpenStreetMap has a lot of things. Check that out too. So play around a little bit. These tools up here are pretty useful as well. This is a pan tool, so you click the hand, and the hand lets you click and drag the map around. If you have a mouse wheel, it'll help you zoom in and out. So I'm using my mouse wheel right now, and it's zooming in a little bit. This is useful here. I'm going to actually shut off the Google map here and turn on the county. If I get lost somewhere by accident, oh geez, I just zoomed in really far. Well, what this does, it says zoom full. Click that and it brings me back to where all of my data is kind of the maximum extent of my data is represented, so I'm not lost anymore. What else do we have? Oh, zoom last. So this seems silly, but I want to go back to that place I just was that was really focused in. Well, I go back and it brings me right back to where I was before. So we'll figure these out as we go along. Zoom to selection is useful. You know, there's your zoom in, zoom out. I think the pan map is a really useful tool. And these selection tools are also useful, but we'll get into those in the next two videos. So